So I want to start by introducing you. Reverend David Wilson is with us today. My computer tells us the time. Is with us today. He's correct me if I'm wrong, conference superintendent?
Well, I have a new title now.
Tell me it.
Yeah, the new title is assistant to the bishop.
Hey, I apologize. My goodness.
No, I keep forgetting that's my new title. I have to, when I hear that, I say, oh yeah, I have a new title now.
Assistant to the bishop.
Yes.
And relates with the Oklahoma Indian Missionary Conference.
Yes.
Is a member of the Choctaw Nation, is that right?
Got it.
Yeah, and an elder running for bishop. He's an Episcopal candidate. And David and I met through our mutual friends, Bishop Bruce Blake and his wife Karen, who are a huge gift to both of us and mentors in our lives. But I have asked David to come and be in conversation as part of a new series that we're doing at St. Paul's and talking about finding our place. And David, what we're focusing on is what does it look like to locate change right where we are and the things that have happened over time. One of the things, I took a Native American religious traditions class at Vandy in seminary, and it was amazing. But one of the hard parts about that class was also coming to terms as a white person of what does it look like to be American and to live and to live in privilege and to live with the sin of colonization and what does that look like. And I remember at the end of that semester, one of us asked our professor, what do we do with all of this? How do we fix what is so broken and repent and do all of that? And one of the things she said is never to tell lies about the land on which you walk, and to learn the story about where you are. And so that's part of what we're doing this summer. And the first thing that we wanted to start with is the story of Shawnee Methodist Mission. And I don't know how familiar you are with this part, but the area, the school district is Shawnee Mission School District. Shawnee Mission Park is just a couple minutes from me right here. And there's Old Mission, United Methodist Church. That's where David Livingston is now. And that's right, just a couple blocks from the Methodist Mission historical site of what that is. I did not know the history of it, and I am embarrassed. It did not even occur to me that Shawnee Mission would be a mission to the Shawnee people, and what did that mean? And that's embarrassing to me because I took a class in Native American religious traditions and vowed that I would not tell lies about the land on which I walked. And it just was like smacking me this week of learning this history and what it meant and the way that the story's told. I went to the Johnson County History Museum and learned about Reverend Thomas Johnson, who Johnson County is the county that we're in, and he was a Methodist Episcopal Church pastor and sided with the South, with the MEC South, and he was a slave owner, and he basically brought slavery to Kansas and advocated for that. And part of the work for Kansas to become a slave state happened at the Shawnee Mission School. He gathered folks there at the school, and what I've learned about that history is terrible, and it's really shameful. And the way that he was appointed to go be a missionary, here with the Shawnee people who had been moved through the Indian Removal Act out of more the Ohio area, and then basically had this school to have a labor camp for these kids, and he made money off of that labor, and then worked to have their land be individualized, and each person had a section that then were sold basically to Methodists to make a profit, and then they moved to Oklahoma. And that's the history that I am learning and coming to terms with. So I'm curious from you in terms of what it means to be a Methodist Native American, and grappling with those histories of what does that look like for you, and we'll start there, I guess.
Okay, good. I appreciate the opportunity to be on this call with you, and knowing that you're going to share it with others for that. And the one piece that I think about, and you talked about your commitment to learn more, is that we are 560 something tribes, nations, and villages across this country. So it's impossible to know everything wherever you happen to go. We're so different, and different, like in ways, share histories, but so different, especially where you happen to be at. And anytime I've driven down that interstate and see Shawnee, I saw that has to have a connection, the Shawnee people who must have been here at one time. And so I figured that. And then, of course, the Shawnees who were in Kansas and later moved to Oklahoma, and of course moved in the first place from Ohio, was up there, I think maybe in last year, when the United Methodist Church, through the General Board of Global Ministries, was there to deed land back to the Wyandotte tribe, who are not too far from you, edge of Oklahoma, another boarding school there as well. So that was an interesting experience, to be in a place, beautiful land, where Shawnee used to be, where the Wyandottes used to be. And of course, now I think there's a tribal group near Kansas City, if I remember right, and then at least 2, if not 3, in Oklahoma. So they're all related, but all have different histories for why this Shawnee band ended up near Northeast Oklahoma and Craig County. The other, not too far from me, the Absentee band, which is near Shawnee. And I think there's a third one. Maybe it's the Shawnee tribe, which is not near Miami. So you look at even those histories, where the people ended up at, and how they live out their lives today. Many who are connected to the Methodist Church, although we don't have an OMC church among the Shawnees right now, members of the tribes belong to our churches in urban areas and other places for that. This is an interesting bit that, timely, because just yesterday, the Supreme Court of the United States delivered a standing verdict that recognized that the Eastern tribes, which is part of mine, that whenever we were removed to Indian Territory, we all made treaties with the government. Most of those they've never honored, or they've taken them back. And so we went to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court ruled, yes, you never did finish up what you're supposed to do to the government. So the eastern half of the United States is a reservation. So it had stunning effects upon our sovereignty, especially around crime laws and arrests. So our tribes at Oklahoma, whether you're from the East or not, are quite ecstatic, because the Supreme Court rarely seldom rules in our favor. So that's been the talk of the town today among our people and social media, and then for us trying to wrap our heads around what that means. But it goes back to what you mentioned, the land base from which we come from. Social injustice, the government breaking so many treaties. It's an alarming number of the number of treaties that were signed and were never upheld, not just for Oklahoma, but across the country. And so for this kind of stuff, even my good friends who are attorneys, familiar with the course, they were shocked that the Supreme Court ruled in the favor of the tribes. And so we're very, very happy about that and the effects that will have down the road.
Is there hope? Yeah, is there hope that that ruling will be read then in other cases of how things are interpreted?
We think so, especially this will cause many tribes to go back and look at the treaties and to see if they were finalized, or what happened, to see what ramifications, including the Shawnee folk who are in the upper northeast corner of Oklahoma. There's about maybe 9 tribes in that little corner there. And so I think many were looking, some probably have already done the homework early on to say, how's this going to affect us? So I see that having a rippling effect across the country. especially those in Indian law for that. The neat thing, I think back to the years of removal and our tribes many who are familiar with the system of the government and so forth, especially the attorneys, especially the big tribes. But what we have on our side today is have so many people, especially young people today, who have gone to school to learn a law, and especially tribal law. And so today we are equipped with very educated folk who know the system, who know the European system of law, and are able to read the cases and work the cases to correct the injustices that's been done over the years. And for that, we have so many young people who go to in the healthcare industry, in the law industry, service industry, with the desire to come back and help their people. And that's been neat to see that.
Mm-hmm. That's really amazing. I was interested reading the decision and talking about how just because it hasn't been followed doesn't mean that it's not still the law. I mean, exactly. I chuckled about it, but then I just thought about how many times that has not been an obvious thing to say, and the sin around that of just how a law has been ignored and promises have been broken,
and we do that in the church even. A couple of quadrennia ago, the General Conference passed legislation that United Methodist Church would not have meetings in cities that had native mascots. Kansas City, your neighbor, is one of those, Kansas City, Missouri. And so for the quadrennia before last, for some reason, that wasn't renewed. And everybody was meeting in Kansas City, Missouri was so popular for whatever reason. We had a special general conference there, and I think about every board and agency met there. And so at the very beginning, one of our boards was meeting there. So I called up the general secretary, and she called me back. And I said, you're not supposed to be meeting in cities that have mascots. She said, oh, but that wasn't, remember, she said, that wasn't passed this time around. And so obviously, while we're talking, we were on the phone, I grabbed my discipline, went through it, my book of resolutions. I said, oh, she's right. And I said, even if it's not in it, you still should have known what was right. And later was apologized and said, I should have known better. Even if it wasn't in there, we should have known better. And then since then, maybe 3 or 4 groups have met there. And every single time, call them up, email, you're not supposed to be meeting there. And they tell me the same story. So they do some kind of panel on racism, mascots, whatever. They soothe their souls and conscience, and then we get to do all the work. Mind you, we're getting this together. We get to do all the work, and then they move on down the road so they can say, "Well, we did what we said we were going to do," and that was part of the last general conference. Folks said, we need to engage folk. Well, folk don't always want to be engaged. They just want to do their thing and go to Kansas City or Washington D.C. and so forth. And of course, now that's changing now with all this going on with the attention brought to African American folk, for Black Lives Matters. You look at all of life that's changing, especially around statues honoring folk from the past, Columbus, and now that's even gone to Washington Redskins, which is the most egregious mascot for us, and maybe Cleveland Indians. So we were quite shocked to see that. They're hoping to rename that. I mean, we Native folk for years have tried, but no one pays attention to us because we don't have the clout, we don't have the numbers, we don't have the funding to make that happen. The rest of them, they just blow us off and think we're just taking it too far. And now that people are banding together to say, no, this has to stop. It just isn't about African American folk, it's about everybody and justices. So that's been neat to see that experience affect so many other peoples, especially racial ethnic people. Yeah.
I'm really interested, thank you for sharing that, really interested about the intersection of the anti-racism work, of what does that look like, anti-Black racism, and anti-Native American racism, of what is there tension there, or is there collective hope or working together? As I'm learning the history here and looking at the intersection of slavery and mission schools, like the boarding school of what that looked like, it seems to me that it's about white men's profit, but there's these roots in that, but then and also these hopes of justice looking like reparations and a real change, destruction of white supremacy. But how does that look like on the ground? What does that look like?
What's been interesting, since the murder of Mr. Floyd, right? George, that's right. I got the name right. Mm-hmm. Minneapolis. Yeah, my too many names in my mind. So with after his murder and protests erupting across the country, right down the street from my house, from the city, folks marched. I'm not too far from the state capitol there, and so that has been so engaging for this country, if not the world, where we happen to be at. So right after that, just because of the pandemic, we've done so many panels and pieces on racial injustice, and of course churches have done that. And this wasn't surprising; never surprises me anymore. As a racial ethnic person, we often look at how we are or are not being included. So sometimes it's for the good. I can't go to restaurants looking at who's employed, who's there, who's serving me, who's there, and seeing if they're all Anglo or if there's racial ethnic people. And it tells me a lot about the establishment. Same with school systems, universities, all sorts of things. And so after that started happening, local churches, ecumenical groups, denomination or general boards began holding these panels. And it say anti-racism. So I said, oh, good. So I look at the panel, and guess who's not on there? Us. From the United Methodist Church. And then I sat back and thinking, man, I got to call this folk again. So try to make the inroads and so even in the midst of this, in some places we're still last, still second thought. It's only after we raise the fuss saying, if we're talking about racism, why do you not think Native American people are subject to that as well across the country? And some people get it, some people don't. And that's most disappointing when the general board, United Methodist Church, leaves us out for that. So that happens quite a bit still. And so, I have a group of friends we work with, Native folk, non-Methodists and Methodists. And so we're working on some pieces. I said, if no one else is going to tell our story, we have to tell our story. So working on a piece of some panels and talk about various issues for Native countries. So that's coming out pretty soon. As you know, even though we've been in the midst of this pandemic, life is still very busy. But we're looking forward to doing this because no one else is going to do it, even in the church, and we have to get about that. So so we still see the effects of that in many places, but you also see the good places where in this city, Black Lives Matter, when the protests are held and conversations, folk interject and include Native folk, especially younger folk. Younger folks get it much better than the older folks do. Younger folk like you, they get it, they understand it, and so it's always great because we're listening to people and they mention us, and we'll say, "Oh, thank you." They included us. So that's kind of where we're at on all levels, I think, in terms of the anti-racism piece for our people.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I'm curious, hearing you talk, you have this heart for justice and also a generous grace about you, right? To be a part of a denomination like the United Methodist Church that is so problematic. I mean, obviously, both of us have also discerned calls to ministry in this beautiful and problematic place, but thinking about what does it look like for you to take care of yourself and to feed your own faith and to experience grace yourself? What does that look like for you to do this work?
Wow, it's a great question. I thank you for that. I tell people the history of Oklahoma for Native peoples is so different. All of our bigger tribes being removed from Indian territory, already being Christianized by the Methodist Church, Presbyterian, whatever, before we got here. And it goes back to 1820s. So we've been at this since 180 years. And it becomes just a part of who you are. And so, born into that, on both sides of my family, my father's side, my mother's side, Cumberland Presbyterian. My grandfather, full blood Choctaw, who gave land for a church that it's in southeast Oklahoma where we come from. And my great-great-great, who's in the other side of the state, not too far from you, near Miami, there. And so later became Methodist, part of OIMC. So it's a piece of us that we inherited, that we were born into, if you will. And it's like saying, it's all we know, it's all we knew. And for us, it's so different because you have 80-something churches that are all Native American. And we all have such different histories and yet commonalities. So that makes it a place where we can live into. It's what many of us know. Many of our folk are 4 or 5 generation Methodists. And so that makes it a little bit different. If I was in a conference where there were 1 or 2 Native churches, that would be very difficult. And so everything we do is Native. So that makes it a bit easier for us, and the ability to reclaim culture and language and history and all of that. So that makes it better. The challenging piece for us, I think, is, as I mentioned to you, that many times we have to tell our own story or remind the church about our presence. The places we were left out. I think it's very tiring. So very tiring. And when all this happened, a friend of mine who's a ceremonial person texted me and talked about how tired he was and frustrated. And another, so for a while there, for about once a week, or at least every 2 weeks, I said, let's, on this Friday morning, 4 of us, 4 is a sacred number for Native people. I said, let's get up, let's do our prayer. And when the elders said, and we do it at sunrise, that's when most of the ceremonies and prayers are done for traditional people. It may not be the same for Christian, but it is for traditional. So across the state, in the morning at sunrise, we say, here's what time sunrise is. And so I'll get up, and so we may burn cedar, we may just pray, we may use a pipe, but we all pray together for the life of the world, for each other, for the concerns we each raised. And we said, what are we going to pray for? And so we list those. And so it's comforting to know that, across the state, that the 4 of us are offering the prayer. And we've done it several times, and that's comforting for me. That's how I re-energize myself, if you will. And to be among our own people, and we share our joys and concerns. And the last couple of days, sharing the celebration of the decision. Now, we also know that can be changed. Right. We'll always have our guard, but at least for a couple of days, we get to celebrate. And then it'll probably change next week in terms of what the Congress will try to do, or the rest. So that's kind of where we happen to be, and of course, energized and being engaged in worship and individual pieces of worship, and the solidarity we draw from each other, and not just Native people, but all kinds of folk who get it and who are our friends and allies, if that makes sense. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. That's beautiful to think about. I love thinking about and hearing the way that you practice your faith, and how that is not whitewashed, right? Like it's not that way. Yeah. And I think about these, the history of Shawnee Mission School, and the way that school was, cut your hair, learn English, adopt these farming practices specifically, and doing those things, and that part was tied to learning Methodist doctrine right alongside it, and how that is, like, there was a quote from Reverend Johnson about how, the only hope for the Indian people was to learn all of the white man's thing, basically. Like, that's his quote, But to think about what it looks like for you to be Native American and Methodist, and that is not how you practice. Your faith does not just look like, rich white guys in Johnson County. So how does that be part of, like, Methodist indigenous culture, being boarding schools, and then also, 4 corners of Oklahoma and a beautiful prayer? What has that journey been like?
Well, that's another great question. I think about, first of all, the boarding school experience, and his Johnson's piece sounds like the Carlisle boarding school. That was gosh, the colonel who created the school, whose name escapes me, that was his piece. Was there are things going on, and the government, the documents will tell you, the early American Board of Commissioners said, what do we do with these Indian people who are so different from us? And so they came up with the thing that first of all, we got to make them speak English, make them Christian in their habits, and to be civilized. Who determines what civilized means? The five bigger, four larger. And the Seminoles, one time we called the 5 civilized tribes. Now we don't make that reference much today. It's historical. We might call ourselves the 5 tribes. So that was his mantra, which sounded like Johnson carried it on. So many of our people they lost their language, lost their culture, and now we're working hard to regain all that. There's some culture you can't, many ceremonies that you can't reinvent, that you can't reclaim. There are some ceremonies we've done in the state, and the Christian missionaries come and said you can't do that because it's not Christian, and it had Christian elements that they just did not take time to understand it, and so they lost it. And so then younger folks saying, can we reclaim those? And our elders say you can't reclaim what is a ceremony because it loses its power and influence. If that makes sense. Mm-hmm. So we find ourselves adapting. We adapt parts of the ceremony, or we may take on ceremonial practice from another tribe, from place to place. For instance, the sweat lodge that many of us use, the Lakota people who really began that, and then they give you permission to use it from place to place, people to people. That's how we continue on this burning of cedar and sweetgrass and sage that so many tribes do, which is historic for most of us, where we happen to be at. Those are pieces that we still get to claim on. But so many of our ceremonial ways were lost because of the early schools run by not just the Catholic Church, but as you've seen, Protestant denominations. So what they taught us, now we're working hard to reclaim all that. And that's a battle because so many of our languages, Marcus Briggs Cloud, if you've met, he's done worship for us at General Conference. He works a lot of language, and he gave me a figure a while back about by such and such year how many languages will be lost, and it may be as many as 200 in the next 20 years. So think about some of these tribes, the Shawnee tribe, Wyandots, who may not have any full-blood speakers left because of this, what the church has done to us. The bigger tribes have a few more, but some of these tribes have 1 or 2 fluent speakers left, and we're working hard to teach it. And so they're developing apps for our phones for young people. Some tribes are doing immersion schools for the young people, working hard, quick to try to regain these languages so we won't be lost forever. Yeah. So that's kind of a big piece of that I think about in reference to where you happen to be at and the effects that the boarding schools have had upon us for the future. Mm-hmm. And trying to figure out how do we live into that, and what can we reclaim, and what is forever lost, and we find other ways to express our culture.
Mm-hmm. I think that there's so often we push blame to the Catholics or something when we think about something like this. Of Methodist history is not good with Native American folks. I mean, we have some painful history in many parts of the country, of what that has looked like. And I know we have done repentance work at General Conference, but then what does it look like when we don't follow up with what action should be? And that has to be exhausting. I just think that like coming to terms with the fact that Johnson County, like the wealthiest county in Kansas, that continued on and then and has continued to be majority white and all of those things, that the way that those roots being of the white wealth, the roots of the white wealth, I should say, come because of property sold from Shawnee people. And we don't, it's like, oh, there's method, like this isn't known history. I just
Yeah.
talked to, a colleague around what, did you know this? I feel so, I'm like, does everybody know this? And I just was on the outs of this, but it's not. And so as we're looking at anti-racism work in the district, I'm leading that team for the district of what does that look like? I think, well, my goodness, this is going to be required learning for us of that we talk a lot about redlining and anti-Black racism and civil rights and things, but just it's so disheartening to think about how apathy and ignorance have moved us beyond this, as if we don't, we just don't learn the stories. And
that's true. And we think about the Native influence in Kansas, the tribes that were once there and now they're in Oklahoma or in other places. There are, of course, federal tribes there, but most who have gone on. And of course, the allotment piece you mentioned, early on when our tribes were first removed here, there were no need for fences. So saying, here's our land, everything was shared. And community was and is so important. Relationship is so important to our people. Everything was shared. We took care of each other. We knew how to do that. And then the government's attempt to say, we got to stop that because they got to act like us. So then they passed the Allotment Act saying every individual gets this much land. And then here's the other piece. What's left over? Guess who gets it? Not us. It's the non-native people who get that land. And so probably folks in Kansas, all of Oklahoma, that's how people started. The land that was once ours, that was taken away. Tomorrow there is a sit-in demonstration not too far from my house. There's a beautifully done sculpture from the land run. I mean,
I have you frozen.
There.
Oh, there you are. Okay. I froze for a little bit.
That's okay. With all this being taken down, people are saying, well, what about this one? So folk are having a sit-in there Saturday at the around the sculpture piece, and so I sent out some emails to folks in the mayor's office and checking on that, and they said we got to know the history. So I called a friend of mine who's a law professor, sends me, so here's the history, which is not a good history. Land taken away, Kansas tribes that was sent here, and then another treaty was written, and never honored it, sent on to little pieces of land here and there. So we see that happening here. The effects of the land run upon Oklahoma City. And of course now all folks are excited and mad about Native folk drawing attention to that, which needs to be done there, most among young people who are drawing that to people's attention, who don't know the history, the real history of what happened with the land run that took our land away. And the reason people got that land that belonged to the tribes, because once they divvied up all the land, that all that land left over in Oklahoma, that non-native people got. So, and I think what you mentioned, the same piece, and for many folk in Kansas, that's how early on folks got the land, and don't even know if they paid for it. Some of it was given away. They invited people to come to Indian Territory and claim your land, and we'll give it to you free if you get here. For that, so yeah.
The stats for Thomas Johnson, he in the couple decades of this school, he should have made a total of $6,000 through his Methodist gig, but his personal wealth at the end of those 20 years was over $100,000. And it was from the labor and the agricultural part, but then also what is named the entrepreneurial spirit of his work. But it was obviously, just so sinful of what that is. But I think it's like somehow the code of ethics just went away, and it's so dehumanizing to hear those stories and what happened to the land and the sacredness of land. I think about, I'm curious, this has been a big week government-wise, Standing Rock. You want to talk a little bit about your involvement with Standing Rock and what happened this week?
How can I forget that? United Methodist News Service just ran a story on that yesterday. I don't know if you
Oh,
saw it or
I'm gonna
not.
have to check it out. Yeah.
Check it out. In 16, when began as a prayer time for elders. The Dakota Access Pipeline. He was going to run pipeline on the edge of the reservation under the Missouri River, without any consultation with the tribe. The first desire was to go to Bismarck, which is predominantly white city, and they said, no, we don't want that. What happens if it breaks, and what's it going to do to our city? So where do they send it to? Through the reservation. And so what began as a prayer time, people came, and there would be anytime 50,000 people in one weekend out there. And we were there about once a month to bring supplies and help. I was fortunate to be able to draw attention to that, and our boards and agencies went, checked it out. They said, what can we do? I said, you need to go and check it out for yourself. So I'd go with them, take them out there, introduce them, get to experience that. And so in 17, that was the protests the camp was disbanded. This is in the dead of winter, mind you, 15 below zero. Folks, the government came and tore it apart, and then the folk went home for the most part, and then the oil was given, the president gave permission for the pipeline to continue. And so it continued. And so all the meantime, people were gone, and they thought the tribe had forgotten about it. No, they were still fighting in court, filing briefs and doing this, doing that. And then while the pipeline was going to a certain extent, I think it even went through Nebraska, because I know the ranchers and farmers, they were fighting it along with the native folk. And so finally, the courts came and said, you did not do a fair environmental study, so we're going to shut you down. So the pipeline has been ordered to empty the pipeline and stop until that study's done, which will be years. So that was a great victory for the tribe, for justice finally to be served, for the people who've been fighting that. And that's been a great morale booster to give people hope and energy for that. And so we were fortunate to be able to have a hand in that, helping with the struggle and to help bring awareness across the United Methodist Church to that. And one of the great support in many ways were people in the Great Plains Annual Conference who really supported us through the effort to provide supplies and so forth. And we were very, very thankful for that. And also, of course, people in the Great Plains, Nebraska, who were affected by the pipeline as well, going into the lands, beautiful lands of that part of Nebraska. So we had two great victories.
It's been a big week.
It never happens in life, so we're probably all shocked.
Oh my goodness. It feels like you have so much responsibility beyond your conference and even beyond Oklahoma. You have this larger role. So I don't know if this is a weird question or not, but do you get compensated in a larger way? I think about the justice of this, right? Of what does it look like to be connectional? And you are the teacher for so many of us in the United Methodist Church you have a burden to bear of that. And Bishop Blake helps me learn more about the inequity of salaries and versus the Oklahoma conference and things. What organizing work, I guess, in the church should white people be doing, or what do you see in terms of equitable distribution of resources when we think about how we look at mission shares or how we look at things? It feels broken to me. This is what's happening.
I think for sometimes it feels broken and feels lonely at times. And so when we have great allies, like many churches in Oklahoma, Great Plains, I shared this somewhere. I don't know if you were in the gathering. It may have been my interview with the delegation for Great Plains. But in the United Methodist Church, Native American Ministry Sundays is one of our 6 special Sundays. The Great Plains Conference is number 1 in giving to Native American Sunday. So you all need to know that. And I shared that with them, and wherever I go, I share that. I'm thankful for that. For the great support. So the conference is doing that already. The other work we do, I think it has to do with the need that we have out there for social justice, to tell the story. And in our lives for Native people, we are so connected. We're we have people we're related to by blood, but in the Indian way, people adopt us. So we have mothers, grandmothers, aunts and uncles everywhere because we have that connection. So then we make friendships with people in North Dakota, South Dakota. And so when help is needed, they'll contact you and say, here's what's going on. Can you do this, this, and this? And of course, we try our best to help. That's how we got involved. For Standing Rock, our people at home said, what are we doing about this? And so we began making those avenues and creating places and ways people could give. When we did that for Pine Ridge after the flooding, we reached out through social media asking people for help, which we did. Just about 4 weeks ago, we went to Four Corners Native United Methodist Ministry in Shiprock, took a U-Haul full of supplies to go help the people there, raising about $5,000. For a small Indian Methodist conference, that's quite a bit for us to be able to do. And so we do this because we see there's a need. But the other neat thing, Laura, is that for the people who help me are young people who, of course, and you know this, they're part of our churches. You may not see them on Sundays. Anytime there's a social justice cause, they're on. So I'll call them up and say, hey,
welcome to my generation.
Exactly. That's what I love about it. So I'll say, hey, I need to make a run to Four Corners. Can you go? And they said, we're on. And so that's what we did the last time. And then when we got home, they call. Others will say, why didn't you invite me? Well, you can't take everybody. And every time we went to Standing Rock, that was the case. And so these young people who are so into social justice, especially for Native people, or service or helping other people. So that energizes me and gives me joy that I get to help expose folk to this service and ministry and to see the need out there in the world. And then we get home, they say, well, call me next time we go to such and such or such and such. So, of course, already planning the next pieces. COVID-19 is keeping us from doing some things, but it's a joy. And just out of my, I think out of my personal mantra, as I tell people often from Micah 6:8, what does the Lord require of us but to do justice? Help me out here.
So love, kindness, love, mercy, walk humbly.
Thank you. After teaching my Canvas course, this morning, my mind's about shot. but that's my piece, and many people who know me well will know that, and they know how much I enjoy doing this. It also takes the monotony out of the day-to-day administrative work I do here at home, which is important, but it helps to mix up my life and ministry, and that's quite the joy for that. And of course, the other piece is, for the stories like the Supreme Court victory, Standing Rock, and so I call up folks and say, hey, I call up news service, say, this would be a great story. Here's a connection to the Methodist Church, and they're on it. News service has done a very good job. So, man, we've been in the news every week for the last 12 weeks, and get a chance to tell our story. And that's what we work on. Is so we want folks like your church in Great Plains and other people to say, here's what's going on across the church, and here's how you can help.
Mm-hmm. So, kind of maybe my last question, but what is a vision of the kingdom of God look like for you? What is hope fulfilled look like for you in the church and in the world?
Well, yes, and great questions. I appreciate those.
Thank you.
I think for the hope for the future, of course, is and I'll speak for myself and for the Oklahoma Indian Missionary Conference, is for the denomination to understand not just the history, but who we are and how proud so many of our people are to be a part of the Indian Methodist Church, the Indian Methodist Conference, but the United Methodist Church. That what many people see as a small contribution are large contributions for our folks, and we're very, very proud of that, especially older folk. And so our task is to help engage younger folk who have an issue with the old church, who says, don't teach your language, don't do ceremonies, this or that. That's changed. Now we're working hard to recover languages. We have so many pastors, full blood language speaking, who are teaching language to the tribes in a local church. And so we have, at my last church at Norman, where I served, in the back of the church is a sweat lodge. They're there once a month. You'll find very few Indian churches who do that still. Those kinds of things that we want to engage young people, saying it's okay being who you are. This is who God created you to be, and that's a wonderful thing. So we're hitting home with that all the time, trying to get our older folk who have been ingrained, who've been colonized to say, this is what it means to be a Christian, straight thing. And that's a great challenge for us. And so, first of all, for our folks to reclaim who we are, to help United Methodist Church know that, if we didn't want to be a part of this denomination, we'd have hit the road a long time ago. We'd have been disbanded, whatever.
Right, like you have agency in that.
Yes, that's right, we do. And the hard part is that we get excluded so much that's the hurtful thing. And had to tell it to a person a while back, and I said, when we left, I said, and you know better, because their friend, I said, you know better, and that's the disappointing piece, that people don't think about who we are. So anytime we're included, firsthand we're excited, and always know who will and who won't. That's just the nature of who we are. So that's another piece, I think, for us, our inclusion for the church, and to make a difference for the world, to reach out or work with tribes in North and South Dakota. They're not Methodist, they're Episcopalian and Catholic. It's another long story for the government to say, here's what denomination you're going to be a part of, without any choice. But to show them, say, hey, these people, these Indian Methodists, Oklahoma, they got it going on. Because across Indian country, folks don't have a good view of Christianity. You can see why. I tell people, and if you guys ever do a book study, I tell people, if you ever want not great in terms of what happened, but a good read on the history of Native people, read Bury My Heart at Wounded Knee by D. Brown. And then you'll say, wow, no wonder. I can see why folk don't like Christians. So when I go up north and South Dakota, even as Native people, folks are still leery of us. Mm-hmm. Even though we're Native, they're still thinking, why are you folk over here? And they're waiting for us to come and evangelize and this or that, and all we're coming to do is offer service and be a part of what's happening. And my hope for the folk we work with, they'd seen that and experienced that. That's not true for all places, but we should work hard on that. So that's my piece to being proud of the work we've done and seeking to be included. Although there are times, or I can tell you, even my candidacy for bishop, and I'm thinking, do I really want to do this? And I think, is this really where my gifts and talents will be used most in the life of the bishop? Because I know what bishops do. I've served under 4 of them, maybe 5. I know what they do. It's not a hunky-dory job. It's a lot. And so there are times I ask myself, especially when I get to do what I do, I'm thinking, do I really want to do this? And especially with all this going on now, the COVID piece has been important for us to reach out, help others. So yeah, that's always a big piece. There's always question. There's always thoughtful process, visiting with others, about what God's call is upon my life. Yeah.
I think about what the loss has been in the episcopacy, not having a Native American bishop, your gifts individually, but also just the piece of what is missing, right? What is not there, and what voice is not heard, and what do we forget by having whiteness be the leadership so much? I mean, I think we've seen what racial diversity in the episcopacy has meant in the Great Plains. Bishop Sines is a gift to our conference, and I think and not not just because he's Hispanic, but I think that his gifts are different, and that we have gained so much because of who he is too.
Yeah, for sure. And I was looking again. I was online, social media, and saw webinar coming up next week on racism that the bishops were doing. And again, of course, we're not there because we have no bishops. And I thought, wow, so again, it's an opportunity for folks to learn, and they never will, at least until that's changed. And if it is changed, and of course, there's conversation now about, with the shrinking dollars and the Episcopal Fund, do we need bishops? So then it just some of that's almost like those conversations. It's almost like we're pushing the bar out a little bit further from you. It worked for us, but it worked for us, those who are bishops now, but now you got a little bit more to work for. So it may not happen for you. That's what, that's how I read into that, which is frustrating. That's when you're thinking, man, is that really what I need to do, want to do? Mm-hmm. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, we won't have time for these Zoom conversations with people like you. Mm-hmm. That'd be probably last thing on my list I get to do, the fun stuff. Yeah.
Thank you so much for your time and for your openness and willingness to share. I think that's one of the things that I love so much about you, and hearing Bruce and Karen talk
Yeah.
about you so
Yeah.
much of the gift that you are. I think every time I'm
Thank you.
around you, I realize like, so much.
Thank you. We're in great company. I hope they're doing well. I haven't got to talk with them in some time, which is
Yeah,
my fault
yeah.
for that.
I
And
think
then my other $50 million question: have you got to use your kayak lately?
yes, I have. I actually am
Good.
going out later today. So
Oh, wow.
Chucky Mission Lake is
I was going to
lake.
ask you where you're taking. When I saw you, not last, but a while back, when I first met you, I think the church had just given you that kayak.
For my
Yeah.
ordination. And
Ordination, that's right, yeah. Been
4 years later.
wow. Well, I was thinking about that, especially if I see that and wondering if you're still kayaking, which is good. Yeah.
Good.
But thank you for this. I look forward to hearing the feedback and response for what folks are thinking, and so appreciate people like you, allies who get it and understand and help to engage the church and the world about inclusion and who we need to be. And always know this, when I finished my class this morning, that's what we said, there's always more work to do. We know that, and luckily there are times we get to go rejuvenate through kayaking or running. Things happen, then we're ready to get after it. So thank you for that too as well.
Thank you. Good.
Welcome. You're welcome.
All right. You take
care. I will. We'll see you soon.
Thanks so much. Bye.
All right. Thanks. Bye.